Circle Call. My name is Nitesh. I work with the Open Knowledge Initiatives team at IIIT Hyderabad as a program officer, and I am also a long-term Wikimedian, Punjabi Wikimedian. So before we formally begin, I would like to start with a quick icebreaker to set the tone for today's call. So it's Monday, a fresh start to the week. So I would like to ask, how does your Monday morning usually feel? Energized, slow, hopeful, or something else? Please feel free to share your feeling in the chat or Etherpad. We also have Etherpad, so we are going to drop a link in the chat. And also please add your names to the Etherpad. Yes, there is Etherpad link in the chat. So yeah. So while you are sharing your responses, I would like to mention a few important points once again, so this is a friendly and respectful space. We kindly ask everyone to follow the Universal Code of Conduct and help keep this conversation safe and welcoming for all. As I mentioned earlier, today's call is being live streamed on YouTube. If anyone is not comfortable turning on their camera and microphone, please feel free to remain muted. We fully respect that choice. If you would like to speak at any point, we kindly request that you use the raise hand feature before unmuting so we can see who want to speak next. So before we move to today's theme, I would like to briefly share the idea behind the She Leads Circle Call. So this initiative is led by Open Knowledge Initiatives team with the intention of creating a safe, respectful, and equitable space for dialogue, learning, and leadership within and beyond Wikimedia movement. While the name She Leads may suggest a women-centric space, it is important to clarify that participation in these conversations is not limited to any gender. The defining principle of this initiative is inclusion. Our approach is that speakers, panelists, and conveners for these calls are women, while the space itself remains open to everyone who wishes to engage, learn, and contribute. So, because I got that question plenty of times, like if this is a women-centric space, but no, it's not women-centric space. With this framing, today's theme, gender inclusive volunteerism, aligns closely with the values the She Leads seeks to explore and advance. So we chose gender inclusive volunteerism as today's theme because volunteer spaces work best when people of all genders feel welcome, supported, and able to contribute in meaningful ways, right? So inclusion is not only about participation, but also about creating environments where volunteers can grow and stay engaged over time. For past many years, we are also talking about these gaps, right? Via through research initiatives, we are also trying to bridge that content gap on Wikipedias. So recent community insights also remind us why this matters. So new volunteers are increasingly younger and more diverse, with more women joining the movement. But the real question here is how we ensure these volunteers feel supported enough to stay, lead, and thrive, right? So to begin this conversation, it's privileged to invite someone whose leadership has consistently emphasized inclusion, participation, and the long-term health of volunteer communities. It's a real pleasure to have our two guests with us for today's She Leads Circle Call. Our first guest is Mariana Iskender. Mariana is the Chief Executive Officer of Wikimedia Foundation. As many of you would know, before joining Wikimedia, Mariana spent over 10 years leading Harambee Youth Employment Escalator, where she worked closely with communities to address youth unemployment through local grounded scalable solutions. Across her career, Mariana has consistently focused on breaking systematic barriers to access, whether in education, opportunity, or participation. Her leadership journey spans roles at Planned Parenthood Federation of America, Rice University, McKinsey and Company, and the US Court of Appeals. Since 2022, Mariana has been CEO of the Wikimedia Foundation, and even before formally joining, she had started meeting hundreds of community members through her listening tour. Mariana has been a huge proponent of knowledge equity, which promotes diversity and inclusion to not only create but access information. So what makes Mariana's work especially relevant to She Leads Circle is her deep commitment to inclusive leadership, community empowerment, and building systems where people can truly belong and contribute. I welcome Mariana to this call and conversation. Thank you so much for joining us today, Mariana. So our guest today, our second guest today brings a perspective that spans both long-term movement leadership and deep community engagement. Our second guest is Sandra Rinches. Sandra joined Wikimedia Netherlands on 1st May 2012 as its first executive director at a time when there were only 4 affiliate executive directors in the entire Wikimedia movement, all based in Western Europe. Over the years, she not only had built Wikimedia Netherlands, but also witnessed and contributed to the growth of Wikimedia movement in truly global network with more than 40 executive directors. Sandra retired from her role on 1st January 2026 after more than a decade of leadership. Beyond her work in Netherlands, Sandra has been closely involved in the international Wikimedia movement, particularly around community health and the development of universal code of conduct, areas that are deeply connected to today's conversation. Before Wikimedia, she worked across governmental and non-governmental organizations in field of water management and the environment, focusing on communication, stakeholder engagement, and conflict resolution. Although she did not join Wikimedia as contributor, she became one over time, and now added she added Dutch Wikipedia and occasionally English Wikipedia on topics ranging from British politics to social history of clothing and jewelry. So I welcome both of our guests for today's call. Thank you so much for joining us, as well as to everyone in the audience. So with both our speakers bringing immense experience from different parts of the movement, organizational leadership and community practice, I would like to begin with questions for both our panelists, which speak to their experience in movement. So to begin, I would love to hear from both of our panelists with a couple of common questions. So Sandra, I would like to start with you. So our first opening question is, how has working in Wikimedia movement been different from the other professional roles you have held in your career?
Well, in almost every way. It's really amazing how unique the Wikimedia movement is compared to other organizations. And I worked for governmental organizations and NGOs and consultancies. I worked for organizations that worked with volunteers before, but the main difference here is most organizations have volunteers. In Wikimedia, the volunteers have organizations. So the whole emphasis is the other way around. And it was quite strange because, well, I was a director, so that's sort of a leadership role, that I had absolutely no control about what is in fact our most important product, the Wikimedia projects. And I was expected to be a leader, but I was not expected to act like one. That was also a challenge. You have to sort of show leadership, that's what you're paid for. but you really should not put yourself forward and say, now all of you follow me and do as I say, because that will definitely not work. So that were major lessons for me to learn in the beginning. Thank you. So I think it's over to Mariana now. So.
Well, first, just to say, can you hear me, Natalia? Yeah, is it fine? You want me to answer the same question?
Yes.
Well, first, just to say a huge thank you for having me and Sandra both here with you. I think the way that you describe the intent of this space is really inspiring, and I am closely following Sandra. My last day as CEO at the foundation will be a week from tomorrow, so nearing the end, and it's really an honor to have this be one of the final spaces for a conversation with community members. You mentioned, Nitesh, in your introduction that I started my journey in the Wikimedia movement by trying to learn about what I think Sandra has accurately described as an unusual movement. And so the time meeting so many of you, and in fact, that's where you and I met, was in October of 2021, trying to understand what made this community different. I really actually feel like, Sandra, your many more years of experience has summarized it beautifully. I think this is a group of volunteers who have organizations, and some of you, I don't expect anybody to remember, but in my first year, I sort of started my tenure by describing these 5 puzzles. And the reason that they were puzzles is because I didn't feel like they had a clear answer. And the 5th puzzle, which I have been talking about for 4 years now, is exactly the one that Sandra highlighted. What ought to be the relationship between projects and the organizations that are created to support them? And there are many models in the world. I also have worked in volunteer organizations before. And I think if we can stay focused on who is best placed to do what, as opposed to just assuming these are the roles for one and these are the roles for the other, I'm confident, even looking into the future, that our ways of working within the Wikimedia movement can change and continue to be what is needed for the time. There are things that volunteers are absolutely best placed to do, and there are other things that organizations can support them with. And I have found that it's not so helpful to, I think, have an old school idea of what everybody ought to be doing, but instead to ask what needs to be done now, and then who is best placed to do that thing. And I actually feel very hopeful that spaces like this help us get at that, in more detail.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sandra and Mariana, for sharing that perspective. It's really helped us to understand how unique the movement is as a professional and volunteer space. And Mariana, I also remember that your tours. So at that time only, I also got opportunity to talk to you for the first time. So yeah, that was really great. Thank you. So because we are talking or going to talk about your experiences in Wikimedia, I would love to ask you that, like, if you could share with us one transformative incident or project during your role as the head of your organization. And I'm asking this in terms of Wikimedia. So Mariana, would you like to go first?
It's a difficult question. Partly because I think that some of the things that I've been able to do that I feel very proud of relate to the work of the foundation itself. And so I'm mindful that that's not always so visible to volunteers and to others at the foundation. Last Thursday, we had we have a monthly staff meeting at the foundation. So it was my last opportunity to reflect with our staff about the work that we have been trying to do to improve what the foundation is doing both internally, but more importantly, how it's serving the world and our movement. And I had a chance to share what I described as data-driven optimism and evidence evidence-based hope, because I think that, when we have data that helps us be hopeful about the future and about what's possible, is that we run an annual survey at the foundation that many organizations run that asks staff about engagement levels, about what they think is improved. And I'm mindful that it's only one data point, but typically in these kinds of surveys, a 5 percentage point increase is considered very statistically significant and very good. And on a number of metrics like how we collaborate and how we engage and whether people feel like things have improved, over the last 4 years, we've seen in some cases increases of 20, 25, 28% in this survey. And I think for me, what I shared with our staff is that it's less about that, although it's something that I'm very proud of, and more the reality that if we can change ourselves, if there's evidence that we can change ourselves, then it's really possible to change all of these things that are challenging us in the world and in our communities. And so I think that that's really been my message. It's hard to change other things if one can't change oneself. And certainly it's not perfect, but I would say that a lot of the data that we've looked at says that things at the foundation have improved in a way that people have been open to changing themselves. So I'm very proud of that.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mariana. Sandra, would you like to go next?
Yeah, because I've just retired, people ask me a lot, what are you most proud of in over the past 13 years? And actually, the thing I'm most proud of was not directly related to Wikimedia Netherlands, but it was the development of the Universal Code of Conduct. I was on the drafting committee of the Universal Code of Conduct, I think it was 2021 or something like that. And it had come out of the movement strategy process. There should be a Universal Code of Conduct. But this was contested. We knew that some of the big editing communities behind the English language Wikipedia, the German language Wikipedia, were not in favor of this because they saw it as sort of intervention by WMF, of course, in the daily running of their projects. But we got it done. We had a very good group of volunteers, and we had, I have to say, excellent support, excellent facilitation by WMF, who made a sort of, who managed to combine having a tight schedule, but leaving control about the content, about what we were actually going to write, entirely with this drafting group. And we had some pretty tough discussions, but after a couple of months, we did have a text, and there were consulted roles where the community was consulted, and it was added and approved. And now it exists, and it works. I mean, a couple of years ago, I saw the Dutch ARPCOM, or the ARPCOM of the Dutch language Wikipedia, published a ruling, and they quoted from the Universal Code of Conduct. And that was actually sort of quite an emotional moment to see what we thought of is working. And it's, yeah, I think it's an important milestone in the development and the growth and the maturization of the Wikimedia movements to have such a Universal Code of Conduct. And I'm still very proud of having been part of that. Thanks.
Thank you both of you for those thoughtful responses. And yeah, Mariana, as you mentioned, it's difficult to pick one incident or project to mention, but you both mentioned your incidents or projects or like experiences with us in really great manner. Thank you so much for that. So I will now take a few minutes to ask some questions individually, and starting with Mariana. Mariana, this year the Wikimedia Foundation has identified four key trends, right, in its annual plan, and many of the activities we are discussing today are guided by these trends. During the Future Labs conversation, these topics will be being explored further, right? Particularly how knowledge is created, shared, and engaged with across generations. In that context, I would like to ask you that younger generations engage with knowledge differently differently, often through video, social media platforms, and AI-mediated tools. Is there a need to adapt the Wikimedia volunteer model to resonate with young people, especially women, without compromising its core values of openness and reliability?
Thank you for that. You know, the reference that you made to the Futures Lab, again, for me is an evidence point of how we are already changing by introducing more trends into the conversation, certainly at the foundation, but I think even in the broader movement, so that what we are doing continues to stay as responsive as possible. I'm not sure the volunteer model itself needs to change, but I think that your observation, which most of us who are in any way connected to young people know, is that they use the internet differently than us old people. I have young nephews, and I don't think I've ever seen them go to Google and type in a search ever, right? They start at YouTube and they use YouTube to figure out what they want to find, or they're using various other tools to engage. And I'm not saying that we should, as the Wikimedia movement, just jump on trends that, continue to evolve over time. But I do think we have to find more welcoming front doors for people to come to us, right? And I think that I've always thought about the beauty of the Wikimedia projects is that they are vast enough that it should be easy to find more front doors, to meet people where they are and find a way to invite them in. I'm not sure that that's always true in practice, but I think that having that as a model and a vision gives us a good place to start. So if we think about things like the incredible campaigns that many of you participate in all over the world, whether it's Wiki Loves Monuments or Wiki Loves Folklore, these have been a really positive way for people to find their way into the Wikimedia movement, doing something they naturally love and enjoy. It may not be writing a long-form text article as a place to start. We have seen work in many regions of the world, including in India, but also if you look at the CEE Hub around really trying to prioritize gatherings and spaces for young people to come together on their own and describe and think about what their own needs are and not having those in any way sort of given to them. Some of you may have seen that there was a youth conference that was held in Prague, and it was really focused on Wikimedians under 30 from the region. And, when they looked at what they wanted to identify as their own priorities, I think Nitesh speaks to your goals in this forum and in this space. How do you, I think you said it, how do you ensure people thrive and that they have opportunities to lead, right? And so that we find ways for young people to lead us into the future. And sometimes that requires again, I'm putting myself in the old people category. It requires old people getting out of the way so that young people can come and take up those leadership spaces and have an opportunity to identify, again, new ways of working and sort of new ideas. I guess all I would say in closing is that we can't close our eyes or put our heads in the sand, whatever the right cultural expression is for your part of the world, to how much is changing around us and how much is changing in our digital world, how much is changing in our geopolitics, how much is changing in the polarization of the societies in which we live. And we have an obligation, I think, as the Wikimedia movement to take advantage of this vastness of projects, of people, of volunteer models that look slightly different in different parts of the world, and ensure that we keep inviting people in whatever way they want to come in. If they want to come in by uploading a photograph, if they want to come in by participating in an editathon, if they want to come in whatever ways they want to come in. And I think that for me is, again, optimism, because we have to have it, optimism for thinking about what's possible to keep this movement resilient for the next 25 years to come.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mariana, for sharing your insights on, as you mentioned, like there is no need to change or adapting a volunteer model, but yeah, that's really helpful. The points you shared with us, I think if we follow these, then I think we can go with our like young editors, like we can bring and we can make space very welcoming to them. So thank you so much for that. While Mariana gives us a strong movement-wide perspective, I would now like to zoom in on the affiliate level and ground level. So Sandra, through our experience, we know that affiliate or local context strongly shape volunteer experience, right? Based on your experience with Wikimedia Netherlands, what are the most effective local strategies for advancing gender inclusive volunteer cultures, and how can these be adapted globally?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I have to sort of start by admitting that Wikimedia Netherlands has been remarkably unsuccessful at increasing the number of female editors on the Dutch language Wikipedia. That this is really sort of a frustration and a disappointment, because when I started, we had 11% female participation. We did another survey just last year, and we are, I think, at about 12%. So that number doesn't shift, whatever we threw at it. And we as a chapter, we worked on this. We have a very effective and motivated gender gap group who has done a lot of work within it. But we don't see the number of editors, female editors, rising. What I have seen is that the whole culture towards women on the Dutch Wikipedia has become more open. That we also see that content related to women has increased in quality. Also that articles about women are not automatically nominated for deletion. So that is a shift. And what we also see is that you have the editing community, and then you have what we call them active volunteers, which is a horrible term and not appropriate, but it's the community organizers, the community leaders, people who organize events, who organize challenges, whatever. And there we see that the number of women community leaders is about 25%. So it's higher. So there is a sort of strange mechanism, and we're not really successful in it, but sort of I comfort myself by thinking, okay, by increasing the participation of women in determining what is actually reliable and factually actual knowledge, you are going against very strong social currents. You're going against sort of millennia of traditions. So yeah, it's going to be difficult to shift. What we have seen is useful, works in retaining new editors, is providing new editors, especially women, but also young people, with a social context, with that they know other editors, especially other female editors, that they hopefully have met these people face to face, that there are platforms, Facebook groups, Discord groups, where they can go and ask questions and feel safe. I think that is sort of what we really see has worked. We have the advantage as the Netherlands that we are a small country, also a relatively small Wikipedia community. So it is easier for us to get to know people and to see where people are struggling and where people can be encouraged and motivated. And I think personal attention and giving people the feeling that their contributions are valuable and welcomed is very important to retaining editors, female editors, editors from other underrepresented groups. But that's probably difficult to scale if you are working in a huge area, like, for example, India. It's difficult to know everybody in India, I think. When I was thinking about this, sort of a question came up to me, and I really would like to explore that further at some point, is what content do women editors create? I mean, we have this sort of 85% dominance of men on Dutch Wikipedia, but if they are all writing editors about soccer players, I'm not too bothered. If the sort of the content that matters, content with impact, if that is Britain has a more diverse perspective, I think that's where it matters. So I really would like to look into that. But what do women write when they start writing? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sandra, for sharing those reflections and practical examples. And thanks for to be honest, even about your challenges. This is a really big challenge or issue for, I think, all the Wikimedia communities to bring women to the to our projects, Wikimedia projects, and ask them to lead the or claim their leadership in their groups. So thank you so much for bringing this point up. So moving to the next question. So Mariana, building on what we have discussed so far, recent community insight suggests that many new contributors find it challenging to navigate Wikimedia's complexity and community processes, especially in their early days, right? With that context, what role can mentorship, peer support, and youth-focused leadership programs play in building confidence and belonging for young volunteers?
I mean, I haven't met anybody yet who doesn't find it difficult to navigate Wikimedia's complexity, even with decades of experience. I'm not sure that we're going to solve that by trying to make it all clear. I have spent years, and Sandra, many more years than me, looking at slides where people try to put everything in one place about how this is organized and set up. And even though I think those efforts are well intended, it's not clear to me that that's always what's needed, right? Because if somebody is joining the Wikimedia movement, I think to your point, where are they? What do they need? What's going to help them stay involved? And eventually, maybe they'll, find their way into bigger communities and bigger spaces. I really, agree with Sandra's reflection that having in-person or online places that you can find other people that have the same interests as you is essential. So whether that is big in-person events, global or regional or local, I think that we have been trying to think hard with communities about how to make in-person events even more responsive to mentorship needs and growth and development, the content, sort of who's there, and how, for example, at Wikimania this past year, I know not everybody has an opportunity to go to Wikimania, but it's also a place where users with extended rights were gathered for a day to really focus on how to build connection and solutions and problem solving across different language Wikipedias, across different projects. And I think more of that in the future is going to be very, very helpful. The second thing is that in any context, I think not just the Wikimedia context, mentorship it's not a silver bullet. It requires investment, it requires time, it requires care. I think even Delphine, to the comment that you've left in the chat, it requires honesty about what people's challenges may be, whether they're individualized or systemic, so that whatever efforts are being made actually can deliver results. I think Sandra was being a little hard on herself because it's not clear to me that the right metric for all of these efforts is what's the increase in the numbers. I don't know if that's always going to be the right metric because quality of leadership matters and who are the people that are going to take up these spaces and how are they going to lead. I appreciated, Nitesh, the invitation in this space that frankly, we need male editors to write about topics that are important to women. We need to find a way to ensure that the content is as equitable as it can be by the editors that we have, and trying to think about where those spaces are appropriate as distinct from, equally important women-only spaces. So if I think about Wiki Camp, Wiki Women Camp that's been run in a number of places that tries, I think, to do exactly what your question is asking, provide mentorship and leadership in a safe and contained way, in a contained space. And then the last thing that I would say is it is important to track these efforts and the individuals themselves over time, right? Because mentorship for somebody to take up a leadership role is usually not a 3-month project. That's a multi-year project. And if we look at where in our movement we can see the benefits of that over years, I think is going to be really, really important. And I see signs of it in the work that's being done on knowledge equity. I see signs of it in the events that we have gathered. I see signs of it in even the topics that are selected for conversations when we gather as a global movement. And so I think, Nitesh, those are some maybe, specific examples of how this can take life and take form.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mariana. I very much agree with you. And thank you so much for sharing your insights on inclusion and volunteer support in the movement. So your reflection help us to understand why care, mentorship, and safety matters so much for sustaining volunteers. And you mentioned that really well, like volunteers like us, we are like long-term Wikimedians, we still face problems or like challenges in the movement. So yeah, I agree with that. So yeah, moving to next question to Sandra. So Sandra, having been connected to Wikimedia for over 13 years, right? You know that volunteer ecosystem very well. So continuing with this theme of inclusion and safe participation, you have been one of the earliest proponents of safety measures for contributors. Could you share where this idea came from and how it benefits new or diverse volunteers?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Well, I think my interest in the whole issue of online safety and safety also during in-person events, I think it came part from my professional background. I'm a social scientist and a mediator, so the whole issue of conflict and behavior is something which just interests me. But when I joined the movement, I was sort of surprised at the sometimes the harshness of communication. And I'm from the Netherlands, so we're pretty blunt just culturally. So that's saying something. But I saw people interacting online, and I thought, well, if you said something like that to a colleague in that tone, you'd be fired. No questions asked, you'd be out. But often in those instances, there was not even sort of a response from the community saying, well, you shouldn't say it like that. It was basically the whole tone of communication at that point on certain, not everywhere, but on certain spaces within the projects and the movement. It was a bit like being in a sports bar or it was very male dominated, people shouting and blah, 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 blah. Yeah, and I also realized that this can't go on. And then when we were getting into the movement strategy, research was being done. And then also from other parts of the world, there came even more horrible stories about total exclusion and discrimination and people basically being persecuted for having a certain background or editing certain topics. So it became pretty clear, well, we have an issue. And if we want to live up to being this platform where we share knowledge with everyone and where we are open to everyone, we have to start improving our act. So that's really where this idea came from. I think I already mentioned the Universal Code of Conduct and how much I think that's an important document. And I really think the importance of the Universal Code of Conduct is that it makes clear what is expected and what is not tolerated. And that is very helpful. And everyone who edits Wikipedia automatically signs up to the Universal Code of Conduct. It's not something you can opt out of. You start editing, you agree to this. And I think it makes it clear to people what behavior is expected of them. But it also makes it clear to people what they don't have to accept. That certain ways, if they are treated in certain ways which they find offensive, that this is actually not what we want, and that they can take action against this. And yeah, I also see that the Universal Code of Conduct is translated into policies at the level of affiliates, and I think that's also a very good thing that this sort of trickles down. And there's still a lot of work to be done because, frankly, I still see people doing or saying things on the project where I think, oh no, you really shouldn't do this. But I think the fact that we now have made the rules clear, I think that helps. And frankly, it's quite amazing that we managed to last for 20 years without making this quite clear. But we were one of the last big platforms actually to come up with something like the Universal Code of Conduct. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sandra. Yes, as a part of community, I can say like Universal Code of Conduct is really helpful for communities. And thank you so much for sharing your insights, Sandra. Your points really highlight how thoughtful policies and safe spaces can help volunteers feel confident, included, and empowered to contribute. Thank you so much for that. So before we move to questions from audience, we already have questions or comments in the chat. So before moving to that, I would like to ask one last reflection from both of you. So Wikipedia is turning 25 on the 15th of January, and it has truly become the backbone of knowledge on the internet. Along with Wikipedia, many other Wikimedia projects continue to bring in knowledge and contributors every day, right? So what message would you like to share with past, present, and future generations of editors who are keeping this dream alive? So yeah, Mariana, would you like to go first?
I'll keep it very brief because I'm eager to get to Q&A and hear from others. When you study the history of Wikipedia, which looking at the people on this call, many of them know it deeper than me, we were able to do this by staying bold. You know, that's one of the core pillars. And what happens when you get big is that sometimes it feels harder to stay bold because there's like so much more to manage. And I wish and hope that the desire to stay bold remains for the next 25 years, and that change doesn't scare us.
Thank you so much, Mariana. Sandra?
Yeah, actually, so two things. One is, don't be disheartened. This is not the end of the beginning. This is the beginning, or this is not the beginning of the end. This is the end of the beginning for the Wikimedia movement. And the other sort of advice to people wanting to join or people already joined is, don't forget to have fun and make friends. I'm not being flippant, but that will help get you through the tough times, which there also will be.
Thank you so much, Sandra. I love your response. So thank you, Mariana and Sandra, for sharing your valuable insights and experiences with us today. So your perspectives on inclusion, mentorship, and volunteer engagement give us a lot of reflect on and how and learn from, right? With that, we would love to hear from audience. If they have any question, please raise your hand, or you can drop your question in the chat, or you can directly write your question in the Etherpad. So you already have link in the chat. So please feel free to raise your hand so you can go.
There are questions in Etherpad, Nitesh.
Okay.
I pasted on chat.
Okay, I'm not able to reload my page.
Just check chat. Just check chat.
Nitesh, if it helps, I see the two questions that are in the Etherpad that are listed in the chat. I don't know, Sandra, if you can read them as well. Do you want us to start there or somewhere else?
Yeah. Okay, if you can see the question, Mariana, please go ahead.
Why don't I read them out loud just in case nobody else can see them? And then Sandra, you can go first and I'll follow you. So the first question from the Etherpad says, one insight from a study was that inclusion isn't just about representation, but about who gets heard, credited, and trusted. How do you, as a CEO, intentionally design for voice and influence, not just presence? Why don't I read the second question, just so in the interest of time, we can maybe cover them both, and then open up for other questions. The second question says, how comfortable do you think organizations need to be with experimentation and even failure when addressing gender gaps? Sandra, do you want to start?
Yes. Starting with the last one, yeah, you should experiment, and failure is not really a bad thing unless you keep repeating doing the same thing and expecting a different outcome. So you try something, you make a mistake, you try something else. It's not bad if something doesn't work, if you learn from it. The other one about not just about representation, but about who gets heard and credited. Yeah, I always saw it as a role of the affiliate to sometimes compensate. Sorry, I'll start again. A Wikimedia community, an editing community, is basically a random group of people. They're not representative for the general population or for anything. And I always felt it was the role of the chapter to compensate for that in a certain extent. So that if we saw that a certain perspective or voice was completely missing in the discussion, we would try to fill it in. So, but in the end, decisions are made by people who showed up, and it's very hard to compensate for that completely. Mariana?
Yeah, I think maybe just to add to that, my experience is that it's nearly impossible for organizations to celebrate failure, no matter how much they talk about it being a good thing. It takes an enormous amount of cultural work for very well-intentioned, high-performing people to be comfortable with how to really put failure out into the open and to celebrate it. I think it can be done, and we are seeing some small evidence of that at the foundation of deliberately letting people come and share work that didn't quite turn out as it was supposed to. I think that's sometimes easier done in person than online, when people might feel more alone in their failure. And so thinking about spaces and forums is really, really important. I think maybe just to build on the first question, I think that there are a number of organizational management techniques that can be used to bring in voices of people who aren't necessarily in the in-group, so that those can be heard by leadership and decision makers. I think it's important not to keep groups permanent for longer than necessary. I think there's ways you can rotate individuals in who are not parts of decision-making groups to join meetings and be able to participate, even if it's not a group that they're normally a part of. I think the ways that you listen within a movement or within a space or within an organization can be, certainly now in today's world with the way we all use technology, much broader than just who is speaking. It's also, I'll give as an example, watching what pages people are paying attention to gives you a lot of data that's very different than who is saying something on those pages. And I think that could help us think about learning from what people are doing, not just what they're saying, and that as leaders in our movement and in our organizations, being able to use that data to help us understand what's really going on.
Thank you so much, Sandra and Mariana. We have one more question on Etherpad. Then I think there are people in queue who wants to speak to you directly. So the third question is, based on leadership realities, what is one practice or norm you believe urgently needs redesigning to truly close the gender gap?
Oof, that's a big, tough question. I'm trying to think what the one thing is. I think it's lame to say this. It can't be one thing. This is such a comprehensive need for our movement. And when I think about what equity requires, it's like systems, it's people, it's like processes. You have to work on sort of all of them. I do think, to the earlier conversation, looking at what the barriers are that prevent people from participating and really tackling those is probably, it's like a combination of celebrate what's working, but spend a lot of time on what the barriers are, and actually understanding what is working to reduce those.
Thank you so much, Mariana. Sandra, would you like to add something in that?
Yeah, I think truly closing the gender gap, we probably will not be able to do that on Wikimedia until it's truly closed in wider society. I mean, we're part of the bigger world. I think I think it's the one thing that you have to keep pushing is keep reminding people that this actually matters, that it matters that we have underrepresentation of women, but also of other groups. And it matters for the quality of the encyclopedia. You write a better product, a better encyclopedia if you have a more diverse group. And I think just keep hammering that nail that we have to become better. And one of the ways we can become better is by being more diverse. We'll probably start shifting things, but I don't think there's one magic key or silver bullet, as Mariana just called it, which is going to solve this. It's so ingrained in society.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mariana and Sandra, for addressing the question. Now I would like to ask our audience if anybody has any question they want to ask anything to Mariana or Sandra. Please feel free to raise your hand. You can directly ask question to our speakers.
Gauri, please. Gauri,
Yeah,
yes.
sorry. Yeah.
Hi, Sandra. Hi, Mariana. So my question is about retention of women's in programs. Initially, we see that we organize many women-focused programs, and initially we see a strong engagement and energy in women's. But often, sometimes it slow down, and we see that we don't see that much of engagement, that much of conversations. So, from your experience, what kind of leadership practices should we do so we can sustain that confidence and a long-term participation of women's in programs?
I can reply to that if that's okay. I think it sort of also goes back to this issue of social context, which I mentioned earlier, that it's important that you create a community, a sub-community around women, a place where they feel safe, where they feel they won't be sort of mocked or ridiculed if they ask a question. And I think that's one of the things which will make it easier for them to continue to be engaged. Also to keep reaching out to them as far as that is legally possible, because in the European Union there are limits to what you can do, but to make sure that people know that it was appreciated when they contribute, and that it would be even more appreciated if they continue contributing, and that they know that they are seen and that they are welcome. And of course, other thing that's more practical, have tools, manuals, checklists, whatever available, so that if people run into problems while editing, they can find solutions, that they are properly equipped to become good editors. Thanks.
Sandra, just an insight from this that I also participate in many events, and I see that women hesitate to ask any questions in public calls. Maybe they feel that they will be judged, or they are just being not considerate. So, what is your and Mariana's feedback or thoughts and any kind of motivations, so we as a women can feel confident and we push ourselves to lead events, to take participation in calls, speak our efforts, speak up contributions, and show our efforts? So, any feedback and thoughts?
I mean, I would just say that there are many techniques that many of you probably know and use, like doing it in community. So let's say there's a big call coming up, maybe make a plan that somebody's going to ask a question and others are going to encourage. Like, I think that there's ways that the things that we fear the most can be made easier if we know we're doing it with the support of others, and actually being planful so that that fear gets overcome, and then it becomes easier the next time, and easier the next time, and easier the next time. The value of a volunteer community is having community so that you don't have to feel alone about the things that scare you the most. And that finding ways to lean on those people to help you do things you might be scared of so that they're easier the second, third, and fourth time is just very doable. We can practice it here. It's like very doable for us to be able to give each other that strength.
Yeah, Mariana, thank you for this, these feedbacks, and thank you for this. I hope every woman who is present here will take this and will participate more in any this kind of call. Thank you so much, Mariana and Sandra.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Gauri, for asking the question. So I saw Maheen's hand raised. Maheen, are you here? I'm sorry, Maheen.
I'm so glad to be the part of this meeting. I want to ask, like, when we are in a community, sometimes there is like a conflict of opinion with our senior members, or especially with our male members, and they oftentimes see it as the female ego, or sometimes they take it on that ego, and they kind of act rude about it. So, what should we do in that situation so that we can handle it like peacefully without escalating the situation?
I'm sorry, I couldn't really catch the question. Was having some problems with the sound, but
I think the gist of the question was how to deal with conflict, as I understood it, with more senior members of the community in ways
Yes,
that are
ma'am.
constructive and sustainable. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
I could say something to that, because something which has continued to amaze me is how bad Wikipedians are at what you would call political action, about getting together as a smaller group within the community with specific interests or a specific ambition, just organizing yourself and dealing with it. It's a bit like what Mariana said about how to prepare for a big call to see that your points are made. And I think when you see things like this, because usually it's not just one person having a problem with a more senior member of the community, usually there are more problems around your members by sort of admins or ARCOM or whatever. I think sort of getting together, making your own little action group and develop a plan to deal with this is a good idea. But somehow you don't see this happening too much in the Wikimedia movement. And I think it's actually a bit frowned upon to have your own little group with your own little agenda. But I think sometimes it's the only way to get things changed. That's my 2 cents.
Mariana, would you like to add anything to this? No. Okay.
Sorry, I'm just mindful of time. I agree with Sandra and what she has said. I also feel like, again, using the networks that you have, I mean, Delphine's comment in the chat that sometimes Wikimedians are political at one level and think that organizing is not the Wikimedia way. And I just think it's important not to confuse positional authority with the fact that leadership typically is needed by somebody to get things done. That leadership can come from volunteers, it can come from organizations, it can come from wherever it needs to come from. But in order to change things and get things done, typically somebody or some group of people have to sort of lead the way for others, and that we have to, I think, embrace that in our ways of working.
Yeah, thank you so much, Maheen, for asking this question. And thank you, Sandra and Mariana, to address this question. So we are over time, but there is one question for you, Mariana. It's really interesting question. If you can keep it brief, I would like to deliver that question to you. So the question is, you have often said that AI by itself is not sufficient for the knowledge needs of our world. Would you explain this further?
I mean, in 2 seconds, I would say that I am certainly not the person with the crystal ball on how the future of AI is going to unfold. But what we can absolutely see is that new knowledge created by humans continues to be the thing most prized by large language models and by AI. And if you look at languages outside of English, even more so in terms of what is needed, I think it's important we're not naive about where AI trends are taking us, but that we don't lose sight that human curated, maybe not always human created, human curated content is going to be absolutely critical, and why Wikimedia, as I've always said, is needed now more than ever.
Thank you so much, Mariana. So as we come to close of today's She Leads Circle call, and I think we should block your more time for this conversation, but maybe next time somewhere. So I want to sincerely thank our panelists, Mariana and Sandra, for sharing their insights, experiences, and vision for inclusive, safe, and thriving volunteer communities. Mariana, your leadership at Wikimedia Foundation has inspired countless volunteers around the world, and your dedication to openness, collaboration, and inclusion will continue to resonate in the Wikimedia movement even as you step down. We wish you all the very best in your next chapter. And Sandra, thank you for your years of commitment, especially in nurturing safe and welcoming spaces for contributors. Your legacy continues to shape Wikimedia's community culture. We wish you continued success and fulfillment in everything ahead. Thank you so much. And to everyone joining today, thank you for your energy, questions, and participation. Your engagement is what keeps this movement vibrant, and it's a reminder that Wikimedia's strength comes from each of us working together to build open knowledge for all. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time.
And Nitesh, thank you to you. All the things that you aspire to for women leaders in our movement, you live yourself. And so thank you for bringing us together.
Yes,
Thank you so much,
It really was a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Sandra. Have a good day.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye.